A few weeks ago, the wise folks at Twitter deemed it necessary to suspend my access to that platform, despite the fact that I had several million followers, despite the fact that I had used the platform in good faith, despite the fact that I had put in the years of time and effort necessary to gain such an extensive following, despite the fact as well that I was a genuine force on Twitter, trending with a rather appalling and frightening degree of regularity. In many ways, I'm your monster, sir. The reason for the suspension? It's not exactly clear, because very little is exactly clear, Mr. Agrawal, with regard to your social media network, apart from the fact that you allow an awful lot of misbehavior. What with the appalling proliferation of anonymous and near demonic trolls and bots and professional manipulation of the public space by actors such as the Russian and Chinese governments, and the proclivity of your own people to censor only those voices they don't agree with politically. The tweet that brought about my suspension was one directed, for better or worse, at the actress/actor Ellen, now Elliot Page, who I criticized, along with his or her physician, for publicly trumpeting and publicizing the decision to have her perfectly functional breasts removed in the attempt to switch sexes, which decision was up to him or her, and appropriately I at least half suppose, but which also served as a much publicized, more than 1.5 million Instagram likes, model for confused adolescents who might be considering, in their juvenile confusion, walking down the same direly and irreversibly damaging road. I don't think for a moment that it was even the criticism per se that resulted in my ban, but my use of Ellen's original name, a practice which the exceptionally active, yet exceptionally tiny and noisy and endlessly troublesome trans activist so-called community has decided to term dead naming, and which has in consequence become, by their anarchic and presumptuous fiat, the modern equivalent of a mortal sin. But I don't know, do I? Because your idiot policies of arbitrary exclusion are unbelievably and appallingly ill-defined. Thus, I am not granted the opportunity to face my accuser or accusers. Is there just one? Are there many? Who are they exactly? Are they inside or outside of Twitter? Why have they been granted this decision-making power? And I continue not to know, even though I followed your equally ill-defined and parameterized appeal process with regard to this censorious and judgmental action, undertaken in the shadowy background of your equally shadowy company, as I have yet to hear anything at all from the powers that be at Twitter on that appeal front. But I know absolutely that you know personally of my suspension, and that you have been questioned about that, because I have been told by a very good and exceedingly influential friend of mine who spoke directly to you very recently, that he asked you just exactly what in hell you were thinking when you banned me. And I also have heard that an equally or even more influential person, with whom you have also recently had very public dealings, which did not turn out well for your company, has raised exactly the same concerns. And I also know that your demented and presumptuous minions have their eagle eye on my account, or that a coterie of influential activists is monitoring my online behavior on Twitter assiduously, despite my banning. How exactly have I come by this information? Well, 2 days ago, I deleted the Ellen Page tweet. Why? When I said quite publicly that I would rather die than do so. Well, I needed to do some house cleaning on my account in relationship to some other tweets I had posted many months ago. A relatively minor matter, but one that became a somewhat pressing practical necessity. Afterward, I reposted a screenshot of the page tweet stating that I was obliged to do so, as I had given my word that I would not delete it despite my suspension and the attempt at public shaming that suspension hypothetically constituted. And bingo! Within hours, I was banned again. So your staff can act pretty damn fast when it comes to registering and reacting to my hypothetical misbehavior, but are pretty darn slow when it comes to, say, responding in any manner whatsoever to the appeal I submitted, objecting to the ban, or at least raising questions about its rationale. Now, those opposed to my views, and indeed the fact of my very existence, might object, and do so frequently and vociferously on your hellhole of a platform. Hey, self-proclaimed evil capitalist and proclaimer of the value of free speech, the CEO of free market Twitter and his propagandistic minions have the right to allow or disallow anyone they choose to post on their privately owned platform. And that is true. You and they, see that care with pronouns, have that right, but have also clearly accepted a commensurate, although more implicit responsibility. In principle, at least, Twitter is a platform that owes its very existence to the habit, tradition, and right of free speech, the very foundation stone of the great country in which you operate, and has as the only possible justification for that existence outside of sheer instrumental greed its hypothetical contribution to the exchange of views that make up part of philosophical and political discourse, and humor and wit, and indeed the narcissistic and often near psychopathic commentary that accompanies such exchange, particularly in its electronically mediated form. And I would say that your company does a remarkably and singularly bad job of bearing that responsibility, as your former security lead has just fortuitously pointed out in an interview in Time magazine, which is not exactly a bastion of the conservative or even classic liberal thought that you seem to oppose so randomly, arbitrarily, casually, high-handedly, and inappropriately. Peter Zatko, your former security lead, has painted, in the words of that same Time magazine, quote, a damning portrait of a company in crisis. In an 84-page complaint to federal regulatory agencies and the Department of Justice, which was first reported by the Washington Post and CNN, and which Time obtained from a congressional source, he describes Twitter as crippled by rudderless and dishonest leadership, beset by egregious privacy and security flaws, tainted by foreign influence, a danger to national security, and susceptible even to total